Hello again, everybody. I'm Chris. I'm all set to count down this week's 40 most played country records in the USA, compiled by MediaBase 24/7 for the chart week of July 26, 2025. Before I get started counting down this week's biggest hits, let's take a look back at last week's top three. At number 3 last week was Country House by Sam Hunt. Number 2 was Single Again by Josh Rouse. And the number 1 song was Just in Case by Morgan Wallen. Now, can Morgan hang on to that number 1 spot again this week? We'll find out soon. First, we get the countdown started with Morgan Wallen, joined by Post Malone. After a 3-week absence from the countdown, they re-enter this week at number 40 with I Ain't Coming Back. And here's the week's only debut, rolling in at number 39. Her last time on the chart, she reached number 5 with Austin last November. Here's Dasha with her second top 40 hit called Not at This Party. And with one debut and one re-entry, we say goodbye to 2 droppers falling out this week, This Heart and Weren't for the Wind. On with the countdown, here's Chris Young, up 2 to number 38 with Till the Last One Dies. Up 2 to number 37, it's Sam Barber and Abriana, called Indigo. Up 2 spots to 36, Max McNown with Better Me For You. Up a couple to number 35, here's Dylan Scott with What He'll Never Have. Holding steady at number 34, Megan Patrick with Golden Child. At number 33, up 2, it's Justin Moore, called Time's Ticking. Up a notch to 32, Ernest with Would If I Could. And up a notch to number 31, it's Blake Shelton, called Stay Country or Die Trying. Here's the week's fastest climbing hit, up 6 notches to number 30 in its 3rd week on the chart, Morgan Wallen and I Got Better. Up a couple to number 29, Zach Top and Good Times and Tan Lines. Up 2 to number 28, it's Hardy, called Favorite Country Song. Up a notch to number 27, Megan Maroney and Kenny Chesney, called You Had to Be There. Up 3 spots to number 26, it's Parmalee with Cowgirl. Up 2 to number 25, and its 20th week on the chart, George Birds and It Won't Be Long. At number 24 in its 20th week on the chart, here's Dierks Bentley climbing a notch with She Hates Me. At number 23, up a notch, here's Rascal Flatts and the Jonas Brothers with I Dare You. At number 22 in its 10th week on the chart, Hudson Westbrook up a notch with House Again. At number 21, leaping 5 spots, Chase Matthew with Darlin'. In his 14th week on the countdown, he's up 2 spots to number 20, Tucker Wetmore with 3, 2, 1. At number 19, up 2 spots, Parker McCollum with What Kind of Man. Up a notch to number 18, here's Keith Urban with Straight Line. At number 17, up 3 spots, Lainey Wilson with Somewhere Over Laredo. Up 2 to 16, it's Jelly Roll with Heart of Stone. Up 2 to 15, here's Jackson Dean with Heavens to Betsy. Up 2 spots to 14, Jordan Davis, called Bar None. At number 13, up 2 spots, Eric Church with Hands of Time. In his 30th week on the chart, he's up a notch to 12, John Party and Friday Night Heartbreaker. At number 11, up 3 spots, Scotty McCreery and Hootie and the Blowfish with Bottle Rockets. All right, here's the first of the 10 biggest hits, up a notch to number 10, scoring his 6th top 10 hit. It's Russell Dickerson with Happened to Me. Up a notch to number 9, here's Bailey Zimmerman and Luke Combs with Backup Plan. At number 8 for the 2nd week, here's Luke Bryan with Country Song Came On. Up 2 spots to number 7, it's Shabuzi with Good News. In at number 6, up a notch this week, Thomas Rhett with After All the Bars Are Closed. Slipping 2 spots from number 3 to number 5 this week, Sam Hunt with Country House. In at number 4, up a notch this week, Tyler Hubbard with Park. At number 3, up a notch, here's Nate Smith and Fix What You Didn't Break. The number 2 song this week was last week's number 1 by Morgan Wallen, called Just in Case. And the new number 1 song in country music this week, taking 37 weeks to get here, and this becomes his first number 1 country hit here in the USA. Here's Canadian artist Josh Rouse with Single Again. And there you have it, our countdown to the 40 most played country records of the week. Join me again next week. Once again, we'll count them down and we'll find out who's got the number 1 country song in country music. Thanks for listening.